Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In the book of Proverbs, we see a reoccurring theme, and especially in the early part of the book, and that is warnings against the seductive woman. Time and time again, the writer of Proverbs is warning his son not to go after the seductive woman, or the adulterous woman, we could call her. And in our reading today, we have an example that the writer of Proverbs gives of a man who had been seduced by a woman who was out and about a little bit too late out in the street, and she comes out and seduces him and convinces him to come in to her home and to have relations with her. And he concludes this by saying, he says, in verse 22, suddenly he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as one in fetters to the discipline of a fool, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare. So he does not know that it will cost him his life. So this is a man who had been led astray by his desire and was enticed to do something that apparently was going to cost him his life. And so what do we make of these various instructions about the seductive woman? Because it might be that some people might check out, when they start reading about this, they might feel as though maybe this isn't a temptation that they have, and they might wonder, why is this in there so much? But I think when we look at it from the standpoint of a principle, I think there's something underlying this idea of the seductive woman that is applicable to all. It could be that there was a very historical and personal reason why the writer is bringing this out, especially if we believe this to be Solomon, because his father David fell to a woman, Bathsheba. Solomon himself basically ruined himself with women. And maybe this is a warning to say, hey, don't follow after the footsteps of your dad and your grandfather. Stay away from the woman who would seduce you. And that very well may be the case, but again, there might be a principle here as well that fits in with the whole theme of Proverbs, which is about wisdom. Because as we mentioned earlier, in an earlier devotion, one of the biggest enemies to wisdom is not necessarily ignorance, but desire. And that is because oftentimes we know the right thing to do. It's not that we're ignorant. Deep in our hearts, deep in our gut, we know what course of action to take a lot of times, especially when it comes to moral issues and things like that. But what so oftentimes causes us not to follow what we know to be the wise choice is because we want to follow after our desires. I know I should do this today, but I'd much prefer to sit down and watch TV. Or, we could give multiple examples, but I think we've all experienced those times when deep down we knew, hey, I need to do this, or hey, I need to not say this, or I don't need to do this. And something within us drives us to not do what we should do and to do what we shouldn't do. And this is all found in the book of James. The book of James, by some, is seen to be kind of the New Testament book of Proverbs, just because it's such a practical book. And so it's no wonder that it would have similar sentiments in it as we find in the book of Proverbs. And in James chapter 1, it says in verse 13, let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust, or we could say desire, his own lust or desire. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. So that word where it talks about being enticed by his own desires and things like that, it's similar to, in the original language, it's similar to an animal that's enticed to go into a trap. Or if you're hunting an animal and you put out some feed or something to entice it into your area so that you can kill the animal, that's kind of the idea. And we get entrapped, we get ensnared by sin. We encounter negative consequences in our lives because we are enticed, because something drives us to go into places we should not go, and we end up either being trapped or we end up being killed, as we see in the book of Proverbs in our reading today. And so, again, we're given this thought to not follow after the seductive woman. That is, don't be carried away by our desires and allow our desires to rule us and to overtake us. If we do that, we will not be walking a life of wisdom, because our desires oftentimes run in stark contrast to what is wise. And so whenever we come across these passages where the book of Proverbs, the writer is warning his son not to go after the seductive woman, we could really interpret that in principle to say, let's not allow our desires to get the best of us, and allow our desires to cloud our judgment and to keep us from doing the right thing, and to continually have a heart for wisdom and to love wisdom above everything else. In chapter 8, we're going to see another woman, the woman of wisdom, who's calling out in the streets. She takes her stand. She's calling to the people. She's inviting people to come to her. We need to have a desire for wisdom more than a desire for foolishness, and following after our own selfish desires. So let's be encouraged by this today. Let's let today's reading help us to get focused, to desire wisdom, and to not to follow after our own selfish desires, so that we can live a life more pleasing to God, and also a life that is more productive and more useful to us in a lot of ways. So with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. I hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.